Good morning, everyone. It's Gordon Causey, as always. And guess who's here? She didn't make my last video, but Candy the Wonder Pup always shows up. If you're new to my station, if you're watching this because you're curious about one Canadian's views on the unfolding war in the Middle East between Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, and I talk about everything on this station. I talk about current events. I branded my YouTube channel this miserable, pathetic little station. No production values. This is, just one man's opinions. 58-year-old ex-military, Canadian Forces. Sojourner Dynamis Thomas has made it here. Let me get Candy out of the way. Yeah, you're a good girl. Sojourner who lives out in the Netherlands. So I'm at a more reasonable time of day for him. Normally my videos are late at night on my time, Eastern Standard. I'm in southeastern Ontario, about 100 miles, 150 or so kilometers from Toronto. So shake a paw. Oh, look at her pawing away. Lay down. Lay down. Lay down. You're not laying down. Speak. Speak. All right, come on up. Show your face. There you go. Lay down. Anyway, morning coffee. So, we've had a lot of news happening lately. Tons of news. We've got monkeypox. Montreal is now saying that it's not prepared if the new variant, the new iteration, this new clade of monkeypox hits. I shared news yesterday about a form of encephalitis that is causing certain jurisdictions in Massachusetts to institute lockdowns after an 80-plus-year-old or an 80-year-old contracted the disease, mosquito-borne illness. Anthony Fauci's been in jail with another mosquito-borne illness, West Nile virus. All these health concerns on the periphery. Canada, we just got through a rail strike. And, there's just so much on the horizon and kind of just simmering in the background. And it's kind of been pushed off the front page is the situation in Israel, where World War III. I've been saying it for a while that, in another year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, people may be asking, when did World War III start? And I'll be saying historians will look back and say, well, World War III started on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas broke through the border fence and committed horrendous acts of terrorism on the Israeli population, murdering 1,200 citizens. And then Israel responded with incredible force and just about devastated the entire Gaza Strip in an effort to eliminate Hamas. And then the war expanded from there, and the war has expanded into the north, the border with Lebanon. Lebanon is home to the Hezbollah organization, which has a stated aim of wiping Israel off the map, as do the Houthis, as do Hamas. Israel is surrounded. And I'll give my bias away right up front. I'm very pro-Israel. I do affirm Israel's right to exist. But unfortunately, being realistic about things and just being, if you're going to be realistic about this, this conflict has been brewing ever since 1949, when Israel came into being. And I think a lot of people short circuit on the history and just pick it up at whatever point is most convenient so that it supports a pro-Palestinian point of view. So ignore any history before, pick it up in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, but don't go all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to read what Sojourner Didymus, what Thomas is writing. He's saying, then again, what's the difference between Israel now and Israel during the period right after its establishment? There is no difference in my estimation, in a lot of respects. 1948, 1949, up until May 15th, 1948, Israel, what we know as Israel today, was the domain, it was the territory, it was under the control of the British under their old mandate system. They had the British mandate for Palestine. The mandate had been established all the way back in 1920, and actually Britain had been ruling the region de facto prior to that as well. Ever since the end of World War I, Britain had taken control over former Ottoman territories, and the region, the parts of the Middle East that have been controlled by the Ottoman Empire, were then divided up between, there were mandates given to Britain and mandates given to France. And Britain's mandate included what is now Israel, Jordan, Mesopotamia, or Iraq, if you prefer. And they had this mandate system. The French, by contrast, were given areas like Syria. And this was the mandate system. So the region had been ruled for 400 or 500 years by the Ottoman Empire. For 400 or so years, the Ottomans had been ruling that area. They were the colonial power, if you will, administering, because the Ottomans are not Arabs. They're not Palestinians. They're Turkish. That's why the Ottoman Empire is alternately called the Turkish Empire. So they were the colonial power, administering the region for hundreds of years, 400 or so. And then the British defeated the Ottoman Empire during World War I, and so the British got control of it. The only thing is the British didn't really want it, and they had committed back in 1917 to their Jewish population that they were going to put forward best efforts toward the creation of a Jewish nation state in the biblical Holy Land in Palestine. And it had been, that region, the entire region had been called Palestine going back centuries. It wasn't a political designation. It was actually, if you want to know how Israel or that region of the world got the moniker Palestine, you have to go all the way back to Roman times. And that was the designation that the Romans had put on it after the Bar Kokhba revolt of 135 AD. You know, this history goes back so far. When it happened, most people will know about the Jewish revolt that happened around AD 70, which resulted in the destruction of the Jewish temple. And the Romans crushed that revolt, but the Jewish population was still revolting against Jewish rule, or rather Roman rule. They were revolting against Roman occupation of their homeland and had been uprising. Sound familiar? And then in 135, a major revolt broke out called the Bar Kokhba revolt. I may not be pronouncing that 100% correct. My Hebrew and my Arabic and my Semitic languages, I don't speak with enough phlegm. But so in 135 AD, there was this major, massive revolt, and it was during the reign of Emperor Hadrian. And it was after this revolt that's what led to the diaspora, the dispersal of the Jewish population to the four corners of the earth. This just wasn't like the Babylonian exile, where thousands, maybe 10,000 or so Israelis were taken into captivity in one specific place in Babylon. No, this was a cast to the four corners of the globe. Jews were dispersed. Many were enslaved, taken to Italy, or to Rome, if you prefer, back into the Roman Empire. And so what happened was Hadrian wanted the name Israel wiped off the map, wanted it erased from history. So he had Judah or Judea, the Roman province of Judea, he had it renamed, and it was renamed Palestina, and that was a Latin rendering of the word Palestine. Or, sorry, not Palestine, but Philistine. The Philistines were the historical enemies of the Jewish people. If you went back, Hadrian knew Jewish history. He knew Jewish. He knew the Jewish Bible. The Romans were highly educated, and they had studied the Jewish population. It was when they conquered a region, they tried to learn as much as they could about the people, about their history. There's Josephus, who was a famous Roman historian, and he wrote a book called Antiquity of the Jews that detailed the Jewish history going back 1,000+ years. And Hadrian reached back to about 12+ hundred years into even more ancient Jewish history, when the enemy of the Jewish people were the Philistines. Everyone remembers David and Goliath, David the giant Philistine. So he decided to give the name to the region. He gave it the name Philistia, and then eventually into English that was rendered as Palestine, and it's a name that stuck around and still sticks around today. Just the way life goes. But when the Ottomans had it, it wasn't their province. It wasn't their province of Palestine. It was the southern part of their Syrian province or Syrian district. It wasn't Palestine. And so, but fast forwarding, leaving all that history behind, getting up to 1920 to 1948. So the British are administering it, but they don't want it. They want to vacate it. And they were trying to stick handle a two-state solution, maintaining their promise to the Jewish population because Jewish support. There had been a Jewish brigade fighting with the British. The British had it. I think they had more than one brigade. They had at least one brigade of Jewish soldiers fighting in World War I. So they wanted to recompense their Jewish supporters, both politically, financially, militarily. So they wanted to pay them back. And so they were going to create a Jewish nation state in the conquered land that they had gotten from the Turkish Ottoman Empire. So one colonial power, and now there's a new colonial power. And the Arab population, there was an organization, I'm not sure if it still exists, it was called the Arab League. And the Arab League was dead set against the creation of a Jewish nation state in what had formerly been Arab Islamic land. Once Islamic, always Islamic. So they conquered it. In this year 700-800, they'd taken it over from the Byzantine Empire. So many different colonial empires. The Arab colonials had it for a time. The Mamluks from Egypt, they had it for a time. Obviously, the Ottomans had it for a time. The Greeks, the Romans. It's been a colonial holding for centuries. Just going to read what Sojourner Dunamis is writing. He's writing, what do you think will be the final drop that will turn this rekindled war into all-out World War III? Well, what I see happening, bonjour, Daniel Copeman, mon ami de Montréal est ici aussi. Daniel Copeman from Montreal is here too, translating to English. What do I think will cause? I think we're witnessing what will cause it. Sojourner Dunamis from the Netherlands not only speaks Dutch, he also speaks some French. I think we're already on the way to what I see happening right now. We've just seen Israel within the last 48 hours launch a series of attacks against Hezbollah called preemptive strikes, because their intelligence indicated that Hezbollah was about to launch a major assault, major rocket fire toward Israel. So preemptively, it is said that Israel responded. Interestingly, to keep myself informed, I read Al Jazeera articles. I also listen to the Young Turks on occasion, and the Young Turks are very pro-Palestinian. And even the Young Turks, this big, burly, I think he's Turkish American. I don't know his name, I forget it. But even he was acknowledging that, okay, fair enough, it was a preemptive strike. Hezbollah was going to attack. And what I see happening right now, and I want to explain this, is that Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, Islamic Jihad, and then there are like-minded groups in Syria and Iraq, Iranian militias, basically, all proxy forces of the Iranian regime. They do not acknowledge Israel's right to exist. They want Israel wiped off the map from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. They want Israel gone. The only thing that the difficulty for them, and they view their cause as a righteous cause, because they view the Zionist forces as being the occupiers of stolen Palestinian land. And that is the story that they have. I disagree with that. I disagree with that framing of the conflict, but that's their point of view, and nothing is going to change it. And so they view theirs as a righteous cause, and they want to wipe Israel off the map. The only thing is, the issue is that they do not have the capacity to do it at this time. Israel has enormous advantages, especially in terms of air power. The Iranians have some old Russian fighters. They have some old pre-1979 American fighters, but they do not have the F-35s, for example. I don't even think they have F-14s, or even, well, they don't have F-18s. I don't even think they have F-14s. The Israeli Air Force controls the air, and that's massive, obviously. Israel, or rather, Iran and Hezbollah and the Hamas and the Houthis, they have drones, they have rockets, they have missiles. Israel has the Iron Dome, which is an anti-missile defense system that's able to largely, but not completely, shoot down any incoming ordnance. So they're, effectively covered, but not completely. The northern part of Israel is pretty much completely abandoned. It's a ghost town, northern Israel. There are in and around 80,000 people who would normally be living in northern Israel near the border with Lebanon, who have had to completely vacate because the Iron Dome, while effective, is not effective enough that it can shoot down every single drone, every single missile, every single rocket. And so what I see happening now is Israel is in a position where they could declare a ceasefire. That's what Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, that's what they all want. Their enemies want a ceasefire right now, because that will give them the chance to lick their wounds, to reorganize, rearm, and to build up toward garnering the capacity to achieve their stated aim. And their stated aim is to wipe Israel off the map. And what I see Israel doing right now is poking the bear, more or less. Iran and her proxy forces are wounded, and they're hurting, and they just want to be left alone right now so that they can recover, recuperate, reorganize, and plan for the next attack. And Israel is not allowing them to do that. So Israel is just poking at them militaristically. They're poking at them through the propaganda, talking about trying to paint Iran and her forces as, oh, these guys are so weak. They're so weak. And it's long been said by many, and this isn't just true in the Middle East, it's also true in Eastern Europe, is that the last thing you want to do is to put off an appearance of weakness. You need to show strength. And Iran is doing its best to do that. Hezbollah launched a rather ineffective attack. And so they say, we've responded, we've fought back, we've hit back, but they've been getting pounded, and then they get a little pinprick in, and they puff up to build up their population and to have their side it's propaganda. It's meant to embolden. It's meant to make the Iranian people and the broader Arab world, those who are sympathetic to Iran's cause. It's basically a PR campaign. Let me catch up on what's being written. Okay, nothing new on the live chat. Just got Daniel. No, it's not just. You guys are awesome. Daniel and Thomas are here. Two parts of the globe represented, Netherlands and Montreal, Canada. Montreal, Quebec, Canada. But to get to Sojourner Didymus, to Thomas's comment, what do I think will be the final drop that will turn this rekindled Cold War into a full-out World War III? Right now, there is a war going on. This is war. And we're not living in Israel, or we're not living in Lebanon. So for us, we're kind of looking at it removed, and we don't view it as a war. We view it more as a conflict that's been going on forever. But no, this is a war that is happening. If you're one of the 80,000 or so citizens not living in northern Israel, you've had to vacate your home, you're living in a hotel and have been for months now, 6, 7, 8 months, ever since October 8th. Rocket fire has been exchanged over this northern border. And it's been months that Israelis, we're coming up, their school system starts in September, like Canada's. And kids, what are they going to do? They're living remotely. They're living hundreds of miles away. And to give this some scope, Israel is not a big country. It's not a geographically large country. It is approximately the size of the state of New Jersey. And imagine having the northern part of New Jersey evacuated. Imagine having a large part of the southern part of New Jersey evacuated because it borders the Gaza Strip. It's not a good situation for Israel. And so what I genuinely have the impression, I am firmly of the view that Israel, while it's in a strengthened position, while it is the superior military force, they are attempting to draw Iran out, because Iran fights not directly with Israel, but they rather fight through their proxies. It was back in April that for the first time in history, Iran actually launched an attack from its own soil. They sent somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 rockets, drones, missiles toward Israel, 99% of which were shot down. But that was the first time in history Iran had attacked directly. And the rhetoric I'm seeing from pretty much all sides is that it's the U.S. which is basically keeping one hand tied behind Israel's back. They don't want Israel to escalate this. I think Israel does want to escalate this. I do think they want to take this directly to Iran while they are on the superior military position. The flip side of it is Israel could wait. Israel could declare a ceasefire, could declare an end to hostilities. I think that would end things for now. And then Iran would have the opportunity to rearm, rebuild, replan for its next attack. And this is where I get to the point that this has always been inevitable, because a large chunk of the Arab world has never recognized Israel's right to exist. We were starting to move toward that back around 2018, 2019, with the introduction of what are called the Abraham Accords, when Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, and some other Arab states recognized Israel's right to exist. They economic and diplomatic relations were either strengthened or established, and things were looking good. And then Israel was in negotiations with the Saudi Arabians, with the Saudis, to bring them into the Abraham Accords. And there was a chance for the entire region to become it would have been a boon. It would have been peaceful. It would have been prosperous. They're talking about a new Silk Road. through the Indian Ocean that would have, brought peace and prosperity to the Middle East. And Iran doesn't want that. Iran wants to be kind of the champion of the Islamic world, and they do not want to see other nation states, Egypt or Saudi Arabia or any others, take preeminence in the Islamic world, or certainly Turkey. And so a lot of people seem to think, and it's impossible to say, it's one of those alternative history questions, if the Abraham Accords had brought Saudi Arabia in, would the attack of October 7th even happen? Because it would have strengthened Israel's position. Israel's economy would have gotten even better, and they're already pretty much the economic driver of the region. You have to understand, they don't have oil. So they don't have Saudi or Iraq or Iran's oil resources, but they're the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. That's where so much of the world's technology comes from. They're an economic superpower in that region of the world. Little tiny country of less, barely 10 million, if it is 10 million. Sojourner writes, not diminishing the Israeli situation, I mean, the conflict war has so far been contained into Israel and Crimea. Okay, yeah, that's so far. That is so far. I mean, we've seen what has happened with Ukraine, and we've just seen Russia launch a massive infrastructure destroying water and electricity capacities in Ukraine have been seriously damaged. That war could spill over into neighboring states like Poland. It's like we're on the cusp, but I think Israel is more of the focus right now. There's biblical implications, there are religious implications. I do think there is an element within the Jewish population that would absolutely 100% want to rebuild the so-called third temple on the Temple Mount. They can't do that, though, because there are two structures there currently, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the nation state of Israel conquered the city of Jerusalem and took control of the Temple Mount back during that 1967 war. They had not, after the initial war, after the war in 1948-49, that was not Palestinian territory, it was Jordanian, although Jordanians and Palestinians are one and the same. It's just which label do you prefer to use? I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I mentioned at the beginning, I talked about how the British mandate for Palestine was established in 1920. And that mandate for Palestine, the British mandate for Palestine, as established in 1920 at a conference in San Remo, Italy, after World War I ended, you had the Paris Peace Accords, we had the Treaty of Versailles, and that they went to Versailles and they sorted out Europe, and they went to San Remo, Italy, and that's where they sorted out the Middle East. And it was during this conference of San Remo where they formalized this mandate system in the Middle East, where the French were given a mandate for Syria, the British were given a mandate for Palestine, and a mandate for Mesopotamia. And the mandate for Palestine, as established in 1920 at the San Remo conference, included all of present-day Israel and all of present-day Jordan. So Palestine, Israel didn't exist, Jordan didn't exist. The two combined were the British mandate for Palestine. And then what happened was in 1921, Winston Churchill, at the stroke of a pen in Cairo at a conference, he took the largest chunk, about 70% of the British mandate for Palestine, and he created a new country. And it was given the name Jordan, and rule over that new nation, it was actually the Hashemite kingdom of Transjordan. He created a country. And so the Palestinians got 70% of the British mandate for Palestine. So that happened very early. And then what remained, so that's Transjordan now, formerly Palestine, now Transjordan. And so the remaining portion continued to be called Palestine. And everyone living there was a Palestinian. They were a Palestinian Christian, a Palestinian Jew, a Palestinian Muslim, a Palestinian Druze. Everyone living there was Palestinian. Because that was the name of the territory. It was being administered by the British. And then 1948, Britain tapped out. They had tried, Britain and the UN had both tried to negotiate and establish a two-state solution out of that remaining 70%. They were going to divide it into another Palestinian Arab state and to a Jewish nation state. So they had their original mandate. The original mandate included all of present-day Israel, all of Jordan, but Jordan got the first Palestinian state got 70%. And then out of the 30% that remained, they were going to create a second Palestinian state. Who knows what name it would have had? But what happened instead is war broke out. May 15th, 1948, a war broke out, and 5 nations of the Arab League invaded and tried to wipe the Jews out, but they failed. The Jewish population, the Jewish Palestinians, were able to establish their nation state of Israel. The UN formally recognized it in May or June of 1949, after the war had ended sometime in March of 1949. So the war went on from May until March. The Jewish Palestinian population was fighting 5 armies. They were fighting the Lebanese, the Syrians, the Jordanians, the Saudis, and the Egyptians. And it didn't all end on one day, because over the course of, I assume, weeks, the Jewish Palestinian forces signed armistice or peace agreements with those 5 invading forces. The Saudis were under the command of the Egyptians. It's a minor point, but they weren't operating. The Saudi forces were not operating as their own military force. They were under the command of the Egyptians. So there would have been 4 armistice agreements signed. And that happened in March 1949. And then you have the creation state of the nation of Israel. But the Arab world doesn't want it there. It's an Islamic, that's formerly Islamic territory. They want it back, and they wanted it back in 1967. The Egyptians started massing their forces on the Sinai-Israel border, the border between Egyptian-controlled Sinai and Israel. And they started putting their military forces there, and were threatening at the time to block all Israeli shipping through the Suez Canal and to cripple this barely not even 20-year-old nation. They were threatening to economically cripple Israel. Israel said that if you block our shipping, we're going to take that as a declaration of war. That's a casus belli, or however it is said in Latin. That's a cause for war. If you blockade our shipping, you're declaring war on this. And the Egyptians thought the Israelis were weak, and they thought it was an idle threat. And so they blocked their shipping. And true to their word, the Israelis had said, there's a red line. If you blockade our shipping, we're taking that as an open declaration of war. And as soon as they blockaded their shipping on, I think it was a Monday morning, while the Egyptian military was still drinking their morning coffee and tea, the Israeli Air Force basically went and destroyed the Egyptian Air Force on the ground. It never even got a plane in the air, I don't think. They destroyed their planes, their airfields, their infrastructure, and pretty much the war was over before it began, with Israel having gone to war with Egypt. Their allies, Jordan and Syria, then attacked, but to no effect. As a matter of fact, the effect was that Jordan lost control of the West Bank and Jerusalem, and Syria lost control of the Golan Heights. So three nations attacked Israel, declared war against Israel, and all three lost territory. It was a huge victory. Israel took the initiative, though, in that war. The Egyptians were preparing for war. The Egyptians were mounting forces on the border with Israel on the Sinai Peninsula. That's another thing. The Egyptians lost the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula to Israel. So all three combatants that tried to wipe Israel out, all three lost territory. Egypt lost Gaza and the Sinai. The Jordanians lost the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which includes the Temple Mount, and Syria lost the Golan Heights. So, yeah, it's been contained so far, but I do think Israel is poking the bear, and they're going to. I expect that they will keep attacking and trying to provoke Iran into responding. And then if Iran does respond, we already have Turkey's Erdogan. I can't pronounce his name. I'm not sure exactly how you say it. Again, I don't speak Arabic or Turkish or Hebrew. I don't speak any of these Middle Eastern languages, so I don't have the phlegm. But Erdogan has threatened to invade Israel. The Afghanistan, the Taliban, early on said that if Iran, Iraq, and the intervening nations between Afghanistan and Israel, if they would grant passage to their forces, that they would send armed personnel to invade Israel. It gets biblical. Everyone talks about, the war of Ezekiel's war, chapter 38, 39, Gog of Magog, and basically there are too many nitty-gritty details when you get into biblical prophecy and trying who's Gog and Magog and who are the I can't even remember all the names. Who are all these different Cush? Who's Cush? Is that the Ethiopians? Well, I just take a look from 100 miles up and I say the nation state of Israel is surrounded basically on all sides. And Katie bar the door, we've got world war. Because if Iran gets directly involved, the U.S. has sent, I don't know how many ships it is now. They're in the Gulf of Aden, they're in the Gulf of Oman, they're in the Persian Gulf, they're in the Mediterranean. So the Americans are sending their aircraft carriers, their Sixth Fleet, the convoys of ships. I think it's got to be up in around 20 ships, including one. I think there's a nuclear submarine in the Gulf of Oman, which is on the southern coast of Iran by the Arabian Sea, which leads into the Indian Ocean. So the U.S., I believe, has a nuclear submarine situated just off the southern coast of Iran. So if Iran launches an attack on Israel, then the dominoes can really start to fall and fall fast, because then the US gets involved. And once Iran gets involved, then Iran is allied with Russia. Russia is allied with North Korea and China. And the world has been, since World War II, solidly the preeminent military and economic power in the world. From World War II to present has always been the United States of America. And a war would signal the potential for the United States to quickly lose that position. They've been slipping. China's the power on the rise. The U.S. is the power on the decline. However, the U.S. still has the largest economy, still has the largest military force in the world, although not in terms of manpower. Military manpower, definitely the Chinese, population 1.4, 1.5 billion. But NATO is a strong counterbalance to it. The U.S. forces combined with the rest of the NATO countries. But China's on the rise. And if a war breaks out, it almost, I would think, behooves China. It would be in China's best interest to lay back and let everyone go at it and then clean up afterwards. I've used the example before and I'll use it again. It's a little trite. I mean, this is a lot more serious than a Hollywood movie, but if you're familiar with the old Godfather movies, and the Barzini family is the one who is bankrolling the Tattaglia family and the Tattaglia family and the Corleone family. Corleone family is the top dog. They're kind of analogous to the United States. They're the top dog. Rather than Barzini going directly at the Corleone family, he has a proxy. He has the Tattaglia family go at them. And his idea, Barzini's idea, is to have them pound the living crap out of each other, weaken the Corleone family so that he and his crime family can then come in and basically take over and be the preeminent crime family in the United States and the world, maybe. Daniel is writing, Jesus is king. He will help us sort it out. Not hopefully, he will. Uh, Love Daniel's writing because that's what will give you peace in this time. But I recognize that most people are not Christians. And so, uh, and even for professing Christians, it's still unsettling. Think about Peter. Peter, when his Lord was taken away, what was the first thing Peter did after Judas's betrayal in the garden? Peter took out his sword and sliced off the ear of one of the guards who was taking Jesus away, and Jesus rebuked him. You'll remember Jesus healed, restored the ear of the man who was injured, and said, "Put away the sword. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword." We are to put our faith in Christ and recognize that yes, we are in this world, but we are not to be of this world. We have an eternal home, and we are transitioning. We are on our way to our eternal home. So we should not worry so much about this beastly world. Although, again, like Peter, it's difficult, it's challenging. These are not easy times. And how soon will it? I think it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be a week from now, it could be a month from now, it could be months from now before this war. But I think Israel is between a rock and a hard place. If they don't pursue things, if they don't poke the bear, if they just de-escalate and let things calm right down, then what happens is their enemies then will take that opportunity to rearm, reorganize, plan for the next attack. And once Iran achieves the capability to wipe Israel off the map, do you think they would operate with restraint? Do you think they would say, well, now we're strong enough to wipe them out, but we're not going to? I think that's naive on steroids. Sojourner Didymus brings up the industrial military complex, which, this is a boom to them. When the first Persian Gulf War broke out, many will remember that Iraq started firing Scud missiles at Israel, and Israel did not respond, and the U.S. supplied Israel with they were called Patriot missiles. I believe they were made by Lockheed Martin, and I tended to view that war, that first Persian Gulf War, when Iraq had invaded Kuwait, and then the U.S. and a large coalition of international forces went in and liberated Kuwait. I tended to view that war as something of a trade show for the arms industry. It was, here, get your Patriot missiles, get your Black Hawk helicopters, get your F-18s. Look at the military equipment on full display. And this is like it as well, because there is so much ordnance, cruise missiles, they're a one-use only item, as are so many of the other armaments, ordnance is one use only. It needs to be replaced. So it's not a pleasant situation, but in Christ we're covered by the blood of the Lamb, and we can find peace, we can find joy, we can find happiness, even in the hardest of times. So let me just read up the last little couple comments. Sojourner Denimus writes those famous words, he has the whole world in his hands. This world, and getting on to Revelation, Sojourner Denimus, Thomas is saying, in the end, we're baptism by fire, and it is coming. How soon? I'm not making any predictions. I'm merely going to predict that we are marching. I think the title of this video is Slowly and Steadily. It's very slow. I'm a rip the Band-Aid off kind of guy. I hate this slow. I almost equate it to Chinese water torture. Just get it over with. Don't go wading into the pool. Just dive right in and get it over with. I wish things would. I genuinely, wish things would escalate and just get it over with. I hate this slow, incremental. Wondering what's going to happen next. But in the interim, while that is happening, while this Chinese water torture, while this slowly pulling the Band-Aid off is happening, I'm going to take rest, take peace, get comfort from knowing that Jesus Christ went to the cross. I'm covered. I have been cleansed. I have been made righteous, not through anything I did. I'm a broken, sinful creature, but through Christ I am made whole. So I'll end it there with the words that I love to share. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And while the world may be going to war, may the Lord grant us in our hearts and in our souls, may he grant us peace. So God bless, and we'll talk to you later. Daniel and Thomas, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.